Would you turn in your own family member, your own flesh and blood, if they committed a murder or any major crime of that nature? That question tends to get some pretty interesting responses, so I'm curious to know what you all would do. At any rate, hello, true crimerers. This is the case of the Moon Smoke Shop murders. Viewer discretion is advised. Before we get started, as usual, please make sure to hop on over to TikTok and give my page a follow at makingatruecrimerer, the same name as my YouTube page here. Over there I have a few thousand more videos, just much shorter form true crime stories. Alright, let's get into today's case. At approximately 6 p.m. on May 30th, 1996 in Tucson, Arizona, which Tucson is a big college town. It has been for quite some time. It also tends to be like the butt of a lot of jokes for some reason, for being kind of like a scummy kind of city, but I don't really feel like that's accurate, even though I've never been there, really. I do live in Arizona, but I don't think I've ever been to Tucson. At any rate, a customer by the name of Chip Odell was walking into the Moon Smoke Shop. On his heels, unbeknownst to him, were two men. They were following kind of closely behind. Chip Odell opens the door, walks inside, and then the door doesn't close immediately because the two men walk in right behind him. And without any warning, without any hesitation, without anything, one of the two strangers takes out a gun, points it to the back of Chip Odell's head, and pulls the trigger. He shoots Chip dead, right there on the spot. As the shot rang out, there were also 4 employees in the building, and they all began to duck for cover. The employees were Noah Engels, Steve Vetter, Mark Naiman, and Tom Hardman. The first 3 names I mentioned were all behind the same counter. Tom Hardman was behind another counter, which would lead to the back of the store. It's believed that at some point Tom ducked down and began to crawl towards the back, to possibly try to escape. Mark Naiman would later recount that one of the men was a fairly tall man wearing a long sleeve shirt. He had on very dark sunglasses and like a black cowboy hat. One of the gunmen began to wave his gun around and just screaming, "Everyone stay down on the ground, don't move, or you'll get killed." That gunman was holding a 9mm handgun. As the employees were on the ground, one of them, Noah Engels, managed to hit the silent alarm button. The second stranger also had a gun in his hand. He, at that point, noticed that someone was in the back, and that would be Tom Hardman. So this second gunman then runs to the back of the store, and then one of the witnesses, one of the men on the ground, would later say they heard someone scream, "Get the fuck out of here." Back in the other room, the first gunman, who was pointing his gun at Mark Naiman, saying, "Open the register now or I'll shoot." Mark completely complied. He opened the register, and he did nothing to upset or anger the gunman. But as Mark was opening the register, the shooter, he leans over the counter, he takes his gun, and he begins shooting at the people on the ground. Again, completely unprovoked. Mark was following his orders. Mark was able to react, and he bolted. And he managed to actually get away without being shot by this gunman. Noah Engels, he started to hear gunshots in the back of the store, and then he heard what sounded like someone running out of the building. And then he heard the first gunman run out the front door of the building. So Noel, he got up and he bolted out the back of the store and he got away. As Noel ran out of the store, he saw a light blue pickup truck with at least 2 men inside, possibly 3, but he could only really make out 2. And the truck was speeding away from the store. And he just assumed that that had to be the assailants. Both Noel and Mark, from different locations after they escaped, managed to call 911. Both of them survived pretty much unscathed. Steve Vetter, who was shot while he was on the ground, was shot through the arm and once through the face, but he actually managed to survive as well. Tom Hardman, who was the person in the back that was being screamed at to get the fuck out of here, he was shot through the head and he died. So Tom Hardman and Chip Odell were both shot once through the head and both were deceased. When police arrived, they found 3 9mm casings, and they also found 2 .380 shell casings. I can't find out exactly how much money was stolen from the register, but it was probably somewhere around a couple $100 is what they would guess. Mark Naiman was able to give a pretty good description of both men, as he got the best look at them. And through that, about a week or so after the incident took place, they were able to sit him down and get composite drawings done of both men. And then this composite drawing was released to the media around Tucson, Arizona, and also in like Phoenix and Tempe and like the big cities of, Arizona. This area of Tucson around that time was known for having a lot of crime, in particular robberies, not so much murder, but a lot of theft would be going on at that time. Just from that shopping center alone, 911 would get calls about 6, 7, 8 times a week with regards to thefts and petty crime issues going on. Unfortunately, police didn't really have much evidence to go on. All they really had was the shell casings and the composite drawings. The 2 men really left no evidence behind. They do believe that there was probably 3 men in that truck that sped away. They think that the 2 men who went into the store had a getaway driver outside. About 2 weeks later, on June 13th, 1996, also in Tucson, Arizona. At approximately 9:20 p.m. that night, a man by the name of Nathan Alicata would go to pick up his girlfriend from the bar she worked at. Nathan would walk into the firefighters' union hall, and this was located on East Benson Highway. And at first, it was very eerie. There was no talking going on. There was no clanking of glasses. It was just super quiet, like in the entryway of this place. And then he walks out of the entryway into the bar itself, and he comes across a massacre. In the bar, he finds 4 dead bodies. One of them being his girlfriend, Mary Beth Munn. The others were bartender Carol Lynn Noel, and then a married couple who were just patrons of the bar, Judy and Arthur Bell. There were no survivors and there were no witnesses. In the bar, police would find, again, 3 9mm casings and 2 .380 shell casings, pretty much identical to what they found 2 weeks earlier at the smoke shop. The cash register was open and it was empty. Eventually they would come to the conclusion that roughly $1,300 was stolen from the register and the safe was not opened. Now, the bartender, Carol, was found dead right next to the safe. She had 2 gunshot wounds to the head, and it also appeared that she had been kicked, possibly by the mouth. Kicked or punched or hit with something. Arthur and Judy had their heads resting on the bar, kind of like this. And then they had each had 1 gunshot wound through the head. So almost as if this was like execution, like put your head down and then they shot them. They also noticed that Arthur Bell's wallet was nowhere to be found. Unfortunately, once again, police just didn't have much evidence to go on. The shooters didn't leave anything else behind other than the casings of the bullets. And that's it. That's really all they had. Jumping ahead now a couple more months. August 23rd, 1996. Ryan Costello had gone to her father's house, and they had a nice conversation. They had lunch, and then she left. Not but a few hours later, her father, Richard Roels, was found dead in his home. He had been bound with duct tape around his mouth and also his hands, and he had been shot twice through the head. It did appear that his wallet was stolen, but they could not determine if anything else in the home was taken. Not but a couple of hours later, police were already tracking all of his credit cards that were likely stolen with his wallet. And, well, they got something. Someone had used one of Richard's credit cards to purchase a pizza and also new cowboy boots. Good for them. And then, very shortly after that, that same night, two men had gone into a gun supply store, and one of them was trying to buy ammunition. The guy behind the counter, the employee, he felt very off about these two men. Something just didn't fit right with them. They just seemed kind of nervous and fidgety. So what he did was, after they left the building, he went to the back and he printed off a paper that from his surveillance footage that showed the two men, and then he went to the police to let them know, like, hey, something felt weird about these guys, and I know these shootings have been happening. They're buying the same ammunition that was used in those shootings, so just in case, here you go. So then what the police do is they take that photo and they disperse it to all of the businesses around this area. By the way, this particular shooting happened in Phoenix, Arizona. So this was about 2 hours away from Tucson. So they sent the photo to like all of the businesses, like restaurants and other gun stores and hotels, motels, and they got a hit pretty quickly. There was a motel off of the I-17 freeway that contacted police to say, hey, those two guys are here right now. So police head over there very quickly. They even have a freaking police helicopter circling in the air, and then these two men, they bolt out of the hotel and get into their vehicle. And then they lead police on a high-speed pursuit throughout Phoenix. At one point, they pull into a car dealership. They hotwire a Corvette, and I don't know how the police didn't, catch up to them when they were doing this, but they did. They stole the Corvette and then took off again. They were speeding around the Phoenix freeways. They went back onto the I-17. They then managed to get themselves onto the 51 freeway. And then the Corvette eventually ran out of gas, and this was in Tempe, Arizona. This is maybe 25, 30 minutes from Phoenix on a good day. And, by the way, on the freeway, they were clocked in going 135 miles per hour. So they were driving really fast and very recklessly, not really caring about anyone else on the road. When the Corvette ran out of gas in Tempe, the two men then split up. One of them ran into an apartment complex. Using his gun, he basically broke into someone's apartment to hide. The other guy stole a Porsche, and then he began to drive recklessly around the area before he crashed the Porsche. And at that point, police were finally able to get this guy. They arrested him without incident, if you don't include the entire high-speed pursuit. When they arrested him, the man was wearing a watch. And it was a watch that belonged to Richard Roels. It was a parting gift that he got after working at a local newspaper for many, 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 many years. The other man was then shortly arrested after he walked out of the apartment he was hiding in. The two men who were arrested were Stephen Coates and Robert Jones. Their faces and their names were plastered all over media in Phoenix and Tucson and Tempe and everything. So police after all this, police got a call. A man by the name of David Nordstrom would call to say, hey, I'm coming into a Tucson police department and I have some information for you. So David Nordstrom then shortly after that walks into a police station and says, one of the men you just arrested, Robert Jones, he was the man who shot those people at the Moon Smoke Shop. And he also was the one to shoot the people at the Union Hall. David Nordstrom says, well, at the Moon Smoke Shop murders, I was there. I was the getaway driver. And not only was it myself and Robert, but it was also my own brother, Scott Nordstrom. David said that Scott and Robert were the two men to have shot and killed those people at the smoke shop. So once police got Robert Jones' photo circulated and then they had Scott Nordstrom's photo circulated, they were able to confirm from the witnesses from the Moon Smoke Shop that those were in fact the two men to have entered the building that day and opened fire. So going back a little bit, in January of 1996, David Nordstrom was released from prison and had to wear an ankle monitor. He had been convicted of some thefts, so he spent some time in prison, and then he was going to finish his time basically on a lighter house arrest. He was able to leave his house. He was able to go anywhere within, the greater city of Tucson, but he had to be home by a certain time of the evening or else he would get in trouble. And he was required to be at his father's house, which is where he lived. The Moon Smoke Shop robbery was done a little after 6 p.m. On that particular day it happened, and this was well within the time frame of when David Nordstrom was allowed to be out and about. David and Robert Jones had been friends for many years before. They kind of parted ways for a little bit, but they reconnected in April of 1996. Around the time the two reconnected, David had stolen a .380 pistol from a friend of his. So now, fast forwarding back to May 30th, 1996, the night of the smoke shop murders / robbery, Robert Jones is hanging out with brothers David and Scott Nordstrom. They're kind of just driving around town, and at one point they come across a parking lot, and Robert Jones notices this little VW Bug that he wants to steal. So they basically pull over, he breaks the window, and he cannot hotwire the car. He can't get it to go, he can't do anything. So stealing the car is a bust, but when he looks in the glove compartment, he finds a 9mm gun. So he steals it, and then they leave. They drove around for a bit more, and then Robert was like, why don't we go rob someplace? Why don't we just go, let's go get some money. And the two brothers agree, and they eventually settle on the Moon Smoke Shop as their target. David Nordstrom agreed to be the getaway driver, so he stayed in the truck as his brother Scott and Robert Jones walked into the store. He was not aware that murders were going to take place. That's what he says. And when he hears the gunshots, he kind of panics, and then he drives around to the front of the store, where eventually the two men come running out and they get in, and then they speed away. And then whatever the takings were, whatever money they stole, they split it evenly 3 ways. But again, I don't know exactly how much. For the firefighters' Union Hall massacre, David was not there. And this was actually confirmed by police because his ankle monitor is also basically a tracking device. And he was, in fact, home the night of those murders. This was also confirmed by his father and his stepmother, and other witnesses all confirmed he was home. But at some point late that evening, Robert Jones comes into the house with Scott Nordstrom. They go to David and they say, we just robbed the Union Hall. And they're like, oh, and we shot and killed 4 people as well. And by the way, later on it would be confirmed by, again, the residences of the house that Robert Jones did in fact come there late that evening with Scott Nordstrom. So this is all confirmed. So what Robert told David was that they tried to steal more money from the Union Hall, in particular from the safe. Robert said the bartender, she was like panicking and she was like frazzled and she just couldn't get the safe open. So Robert just kicked her in the face and then shot her twice in the head. Again, without hesitation, without remorse, without any feeling. He just did it as if she was nothing. Robert then tells David that they forced the other two patrons of the bar to put their head sideways on the bar, and then they just shot them execution style right then and there. And then they shot the other employee as well. Robert says he then took Arthur Bell's wallet, took all of the credit cards and cash from it, and then they eventually burned the wallet. The ammunition that was left behind, or the casings that was left behind from both crime scenes, were confirmed to be of the same, but unfortunately they didn't have the guns. Apparently Robert told David that he threw his 9mm in a nearby lake and pond. So when police got all of this, they began to search all of the ponds and all of the nearby, water sources that they could, because Robert wasn't specific about where he threw it, which pond. But police, they just could not find any of the guns. And then the .380 also gone. Now, Robert Jones obviously is already in custody, and so at that point they arrest David Nordstrom, and then they head on over to Scott Nordstrom's trailer, where he is basically trying to hide out, and they arrest him, and without incident. Now, Stephen Coates, the man who was with Robert Jones during the Richard Rowell's murder, he had nothing to do with the previous two robberies and murders. He was just another scumbag friend of Robert who was like, okay, let's go kill someone and rob them. So Stephen Coates would be convicted of the murder of Richard Rowell's, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Robert Jones would try to claim that he was being set up by the Nordstrom brothers, that David was the mastermind and it was David and Scott who did all the murders. But police knew that David had nothing to do with the Union Hall because, again, they were able to track his whereabouts using the ankle monitor. Robert also forgets they left witnesses behind in the smoke shop murders, and those witnesses were able to ID Robert Jones as the man, along with Scott, to have gone in there, pulled the trigger. Like, it was him. So in terms of the trials of the Nordstrom brothers as well as Robert Jones. So starting with David. David Nordstrom, because he agreed to testify at both of the other men's trials, including his own brother, he testified against his own brother. This is why I asked that question at the beginning of the video. I'm just curious to know what you guys would do. I guess this is a different situation since David was technically involved, but either way, I guess what would you guys do, David was, because of all of his cooperation, because he was the one to come forward with his guilty conscience and say this is what happened, and he testified against everyone, they did not charge him with any of the murders. He was just charged with the getaway driver aspect of the crime, and he was charged with robbery. And from what I can tell, it looks like he was sentenced to about 5 years in prison for that particular involvement. Robert Jones was found guilty of 7 murders, and he was sentenced to 7 death sentences. Scott Nordstrom was also convicted, and he was convicted of 6 murders, and he too got 6 death sentences. Unfortunately they can't revive the person and execute them again, but it's really more about making the statement of, we got you for all of them. On October 23rd, 2013, at approximately 10:52 a.m., Robert Jones was executed by lethal injection. He had no final meal because he said it was just another meal. It's nothing important about it. And he also joked while he was being strapped to the table, hey, do you guys want some help? I can help inject the chemicals if you want to save some time. I can help you guys out. No one laughed. And then he was, executed. Scott Nordstrom is still currently awaiting his ultimate fate of execution. But as of today, he is still kicking it on death row. So ultimately my question, and you'll never get an answer to this question, but why? Why did you just blatantly just walk in and just shoot people for God only knows the small amount of money? Like, poor Chip Odell, he was just walking into the smoke shop. He had just no cares in the world, just walking in there to go make a purchase, and then boom, without even knowing what was about to happen, just gets shot in the back of the head. Why? For what? What was the point? What was the reason? Is it just because it was like a thrill kill for them? Was it just like exciting for them to kill people? I don't get it. I don't think I'll ever understand how people can just do it. Just do that. Just end a life without any remorse. Like, what the hell? Why are these monsters created? And I don't know. It's just it's aggravating. But at any rate, folks, that is it for this case. I hope you found it interesting, of course. As usual, like I say at the beginning, make sure you head on over to TikTok and give me a follow over there if you want to see a lot more shorter form crime stories. If you have a case that you would like to recommend to me, please go to my link tree, which is in the description of this video below, and just go to my crimerer case list and scroll through that list. I know it's long. It's like 4,000 plus names on there. And if you don't want to do that, just if you're on a computer, hit Control F and then search for a name. If you're on a phone, go to the top and hit the little 3 dots and then choose Find and Replace and then type in the name. If the name you want me to cover does not show up, then you can send me an email to mikey@truecrimerer.com, which is also in the description below. And then I can add that case to my list once I see the email. It takes me time because I get a lot of emails, so be patient. Also be patient with me covering the case because, again, I have over 4,000 names. I choose the cases at random to be fair, so it may be a while before I cover the case you want me to cover. No, I don't accept payments to cover cases sooner rather than later. I don't do anything like that. It's just I cover it when I cover it. And then lastly, if you've noticed the shirt I've been wearing this entire video, the Owl Did It shirt, this is part of my merch. We have other shirts that have just like the page name. We have other shirts with like little sayings on it. You can do like rainbow font for some of them to support the LGBTQ. We also sell wine glasses, which you can now customize, by the way. You can customize one of the words on there. We also sell mugs. We will soon, hopefully, be selling shot glasses and also pop sockets for the back of your phone, and other little things that we're trying to work on to get as well. So again, in the description below in the link tree, my merch store is right there. We are on Etsy right now, but we will soon be moving to another location. But once that happens, I'll let you guys know. Yeah, that's it. All right. Until then, ring-a-ding-a-ding. Thank you. The dogs are saying hello. By the way, here's one of them. Here's Molly. This is Molly the crime dog. Say hi. Okay. He needs Mama. This is one of them. Until the next video, though. Ta-ta for now. True crime. Rudies. I think I just had a stroke. We're good. Okay, bye.